For the first time since he sat down in the tent and talked to us about an Oregon loss, Ryan Day hit the podium, talked about Ohio State ahead of the matchup with Nebraska. A lot to get to. Tim May, the 41-year vet, Andy Backstrom, and me, Spencer Holbrook. We're going to go housekeeping first. No comment on Lathan Ransom's injury. We do not have anything about that. Will Kasmerick out indefinitely. He said tight ends are going to have to step up. Of course, the big news. First, Quinshon Judkins, he said that he's feeling better right now. He did confirm the minor procedure. Didn't really say much else. But then the big news, Josh Simmons, starting left tackle, out for the season with a knee injury. Ryan Day confirmed that to the crowd of media there in the team room. And Zen Michalski will be the left tackle starting this week. So that's the housekeeping news to get to. But the big news, of course, aside from all of the different injury updates and things of that nature, is the defense. Andy, Ryan Day saying the pass rush, quote, has to change, because when it doesn't work, Nick Saban's comments about antiquated pass rush were accurate. If it doesn't work, he said that has to change. A lot of defensive talk with the head ball coach today. What'd you learn?
He was asked about this relationship between Jim Knowles, defense coordinator, and Larry Johnson, defensive line coach. A lot has been talked about whether if they're on the same page or not. Ryan Day said they are, in fact, on the same page, and they spent a lot of time over the last week having conversations from a philosophical standpoint about the defense and what they need to do in terms of their defensive fronts and strategy going forward. But as you said, Spencer, something needs to change. Ohio State's getting pressure. They're actually near the top of the country, as well as, of course, the Big Ten in pressure rate, but the sacks aren't coming. They didn't have a single sack against Oregon. In those matchup games, you need to actually finish those havoc-wreaking plays. They just haven't done that. I think they're averaging 2.8 sacks per game. But again, the big goose egg at Oregon in the sack department is what everyone remembers most.
Yeah, by the way, one other quick update. I understand Lathan Ransom was in a boot for a while, but he's out of the boot now. He had that foot injury at Wisconsin last year, and you always want to be cautious in kind of a situation if something flares up. But I'm hearing nothing long-lasting in that regard. Now, in terms of the pass rush, exactly. I mean, whatever the reason is, they didn't get to the quarterback and sack the quarterback 2 weeks ago, Dylan Gabriel, who looked like a big-time performer in that game and made some plays with his feet, moving around a little bit. And, of course, his boot keep for a touchdown was as big a play as there was in that game 2 weeks ago when he was untouched. Just little things you clearly they've got to clean up. And I know you heard me ask Ryan Day, when you walk into a meeting now, do you walk in saying, this is what's got to change, or you walk in and it's a conversation? And he said both, a little bit of both. And it's very interesting to see what's going to come out of this. But fellas, that was against light competition. This week is not against light competition. I'm thinking watching this team for the first 5 games of the year, you felt pretty damn good where the defense was, right? And then all of a sudden they get exposed. Deep ball, giving up runs, key runs, etc. There are all kinds of things that need to be shaped up, including getting a sack or two just to show you can do it against light competition.
Yeah, I think that's all taken pretty good points there, Tim. They did say that they're confident in Denzel Burke moving forward. There were questions about Jermaine Matthews. We'll have more of that at lettermenrow.com. We can't get to everything here in just a video format, so go to lettermenrow.com. Make sure to become a member there today. I believe it's 50% off right now, so you get a little bit of a discount as well. Shave some off the top, like my head. But the big story, obviously, is the pass rush, because there were no sacks. This is just another big game where there are no sacks. Will Howard, I'm not shifting this over to the offense, but I do think it's interesting. Will Howard said that it's almost better to take a loss like this in the regular season than it is at the end of the year, because you can learn from things. They don't get what he said, quote, swept under the rug. I think that applies much more for the defense than it does the offense, even if that quote came from the quarterback, because, whether they were going to change things or not, regardless, it doesn't matter, because they didn't win the game. Now that you've lost the game, Ryan Day, again, it's in the notebook here, that has to change. It almost seems like he did walk into, the defensive line room, and say, this has to change. Something has to be done. We're not getting enough pressure. The advanced numbers be damned, because they look fantastic. It looks sparkly. It looks shiny. It looks beautiful. And it's just not the reality when you watch the games. They're not getting to the quarterback. And so that is what appears to be right now the focus for this team, is how do we create more havoc? You said havoc-wreaking plays. How do we get those? It's one thing to get him against Iowa. Cade McNamara is not any good. It's one thing to get him against Michigan State and the turnover machine and Aiden Childs. They had 4 sacks in each of those games. Nobody cares what you do in those games. They care what you do against Oregon, and they definitely care now what you do to set the tone for the rest of the season against Nebraska. And I would suspect, Andy, that we're going to see some changes to this defense, whether that's Jordan Hancock playing safety or Lorenzo Styles or Malik Hartford or Jalen McClain in place of Lathan Ransom, whether it's different looking fronts. We've seen a 4-down front from Ohio State almost exclusively for 3 years. Does that change at all? I just think you're going to see new things because I told you this when we were walking on the press conference. Right now, we can only take Ryan Day at his word for it that something has to change. It's up to them to show us on Saturday that something has to change because right now it's just lip service and the actions have to be more consequential than the words on Saturday.
Well, I feel like every offseason we hear these creative ideas from Jim Knowles, whether it's like the double eagle that he talked about this offseason with potentially pulling back JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and having them play almost like outside linebacker. Of course, we haven't seen that yet. We have seen a lot of the Rushman package this year, which we didn't see as much of last season. But again, whether it's a Jack or the double eagle or all these creative ideas, we just don't see it in action as much. And it was Bill Landis that asked, Ryan Day today, there's a lot that Jim Knowles did at Oklahoma State that we just don't see with the Ohio State defense. We haven't seen since he took over. And I think right now it's striking the balance between doing what you can with the talent you have here and not overcomplicating things, but at the same time spicing some things up a little bit more, having more creativity that made Jim Knowles, and kind of let him do his thing.
Yeah. Of course, on that big touchdown pass that Denzel Burke gave up, they did something totally out of the ordinary, dropping. It looked like they dropped all 4 defensive linemen.
They sure did.
Your 2 linebackers stepped up, so they did do that and paid for it big time because nobody got to the quarterback. Dylan Gabriel, watch, he's left-handed. I'm fake left-handed as much as I can. He just laid a gem right there to what was it? It was the receiver transfer.
It was Tez Johnson, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was the other kid. But anyway, bottom line is he had just run right by Denzel Burke on a little bit of a hasty double move, and so you paid for it, by getting out of the ordinary. I still believe that this defensive front, especially the front 4, especially when Tyleik Williams is in the game, has the ability to create havoc on its own. No matter who they're playing, I truly believe that. You spice it up with a blitz package of one sort or another, but I don't think you just start throwing stuff against the wall either. I think you play some other people like a Mitchell Melton, who I think has shown some things.
Caden Curry.
And Caden Curry, obviously, and Kenyatta Jackson maybe a little bit more. So I think it's more personnel driven than it is necessarily scheme driven.
Well, and I even had talked in after the first couple games, I thought C.J. Hicks was struggling at linebacker. Well, guess where he doesn't struggle? They always talk about how he is one of the best blitzing players on this team. If you're having pass rush troubles, maybe it's time to turn that dial up and see if he can do some things differently.
Parsons.
It appears to me, from what I heard today and what we heard, that Ryan Day believes they have the talent to get to the quarterback. He talks about 3 things: talent, coaching, and scheme. I don't think he feels it's the talent. I don't think anybody in this building or any of us believe it's a talent level. They have talented players. They have some of the most elite players in the country. That becomes a coaching issue and a scheme issue. And so it doesn't happen here. It happens in the meeting room. Because if it was personnel, it would be all on the field. The players have to do better. I don't think this is a player issue. I think this is a coaching and a scheme issue. You know what else gives people issues is when they can't find tickets online. You got these ticketing sites throwing the book at you, trying to get you with all these fees. GameTime.co and the GameTime app, they just don't do that. Go to GameTime.co, use the GameTime app, use that GameTime Picks feature that lets you customize how you see your ticketing feed, and come to Ohio State versus Nebraska. There are tickets available on GameTime.co and using the GameTime app that are under $100 a piece. That's expensive. To get into the Horseshoe, it's pretty dang cheap. And to see a conference game with beautiful weather in late October, I don't think it gets any better than that. Big noon kickoff. It's going to be a great time in the Horseshoe. Oh, by the way, you get $20 off when you use the code ON3. If you use the code ON3 at checkout, you get $20 off your first purchase in the GameTime app. That's what Tim uses to see all his theatrical performances, and he uses it to hit up some concerts here in the city. My parents might use it this week to come see the Buckeyes because I told them the tickets are a little cheaper than they normally are. Use the GameTime app, GameTime.co, your best place to find tickets. And then once you get your tickets, you find a cheaper ticket on a competing ticketing app in the same row, same section, send it in at Game Time, they give you 110% the difference. It's that easy. GameTime.co, Game Time app. Make sure to use that GameTime.co in the Game Time app. Use the code ON3, get $20 off your first order. Andy, we also talked to Will Howard. I no longer have my notebook because it was a prop for the ad. That's okay.
I liked it.
There was a lot to learn from Will Howard as well about that final sequence. Tim's going to write about that at lettermenrow.com, 50% off right now. But I think there's a lot of optimism. He said that he thought he played solid. I think I would agree with that. The numbers all agree with that. He looked really good, didn't get the job done. So this offense, it's not just a defensive issue. This offense has some things to clean up as they go into the next game. There was some issue on whether Ryan Day was talking about the defensive deep ball and they were going to work on it, or the offensive deep ball that they were going to work on it. Bottom line is, I think both could use some work, some grease for the wheels. So Will Howard was asked about the deep ball quite a bit, and I think they're gonna start to see if that can become a feature of this offense.
Yeah, he's 8 of 15 on passes traveling 20 or more air yards, so completion percentage-wise, pretty good. They just haven't done a lot of it, and I think maybe that's where they'll ramp things up as they go forward. But overall, pretty strong response by Will Howard today. You know, a lot of really good money quotes, as we would call it, sound bites maybe in our industry.
Yep.
I think he really wants to take this loss and use it as a turning point for this team, something you look back on and say, this is why we turned the page, we won a national championship, because we responded from something like this. Spencer kind of hit at that earlier, and I think that that's a really powerful thing for your quarterback to stand up at the podium and say. Yep. I think, you know, sometimes you don't get that from a quarterback. I think that was important that he did that today. And also, you know, he's looking back at that final sequence and he said, yeah, I think I was down with 1 second. But then he followed and said, but I should have gone down quicker, because we always talk about leaving no doubt. And if he got out quicker, there would have been doubt about that. And so I think that was good that he was able to follow up with that and say, yeah, I thought I was down. I thought I made the right decision, but ultimately it doesn't matter because I wasn't. And that's not the way it was called. And I think the way he kind of had poise at the podium today and turned things to the next page was important as a leader of this team.
Yeah, we've seen 2 showdown games in the last 2 weeks, one of which was Ohio State at Oregon, the other of which was Georgia at Texas. Both times you've seen crowd response affect a major moment in the game. We saw it with the water bottles and whatever else was being thrown in that Georgia game when Texas was called for offensive pass interference, and that was reversed on that. That didn't really do Texas that much good in the long run, but now, you know, they put out an edict in the Southeastern Conference about if this happens again, I mean, teams can face, the officials got it wrong, but then now teams can face some reparations, for want of another term, for their crowd getting out of control. It was going to be a miracle if the officials could have cleared Autzen Stadium Field after that last play was ruled the last play of the game, at least in everybody's mind, and everybody stormed the field. And you really got the sense they didn't really want to deal with that. You know, I mean, that's where I left there feeling that. But the bottom line is, like I'm writing about, like you talked about, so much can be learned from one play. Forget about how it ended for you, whether you got robbed or not. So much can be learned from one play. It's crazy. You may never face that situation again. Like Ryan Day said, when he was a quarterback in New Hampshire, he never faced that kind of situation where like 6 decisions have to be made in a span of 4 seconds. And sometimes 3 of those are in the span of a second. But it helps you in a deja vu sense when you've been through something like that. And with that said, this is really funny because they're honoring the 2014 national championship team this year, or this weekend at Ohio State. They lost to Virginia Tech and looked bad doing it.
They looked terrible doing it.
I mean, they looked a lot worse than Ohio State losing at Oregon. I mean, all the pundits, etc., everybody votes in polls. Ohio State's still number 4 in the country, and they lost by 1 point at Oregon. I mean, a lot of people still believe in this team. I'm not sure how many people believed that 2014 team, and then, of course, it took its own course and ended up winning the very first college football playoff championship. So, yeah, there's a lot of football to be played. And now you face a team that got beat 56-7 by, I'm not sure Indiana's Cinderella anymore. I think Indiana belongs at the ball. You know what I mean?
Call him Sigdarella.
There you go, Sigdarella. That's fine with me. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds good.
Their coach is Kurt Signetti.
I know. Just Google it. I mean, they're getting it done. But now, what kind of team are you running into Saturday? We're going to get into that later in the week, I'm sure. But you don't slide on anybody anymore.
No, Nebraska's going to come in here trying to prove something. The bad news for the Cornhuskers is there's a lot for this team to prove as well.
Yeah.
The number 4 team in the country, like you said, somehow somebody in the polls who lives in the state of Ohio has Ohio State number 8 and Oregon number 1. I real head scratcher there. The college poll tracker goes through all of those. I thought it was crazy, but that's a show for another time as well.
Wow.
We're going to get out of here. Tim May, the 41-year vet, Andy Backstrom. We got to get to LettermenRow.com to write all of this content for you guys. That's where you come in. Go to LettermenRow.com right now. Get that coverage for 50% off. 50% off at LettermenRow.com. It's the place to be. Oh, by the way, like the video below. It helps us out a lot. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you guys back in here on Wednesday night for more breakdowns of the Buckeyes. We'll see you over at LettermenRow.com.